And today we got a highly esteemed panel to talk about the controls and building automation systems. And we're excited. I think it's gonna be a great one. And I'm looking forward to this one first. So you know, my dad has been in this business 40 some odd years, maybe 50 some odd years. And DDC controls came out maybe in the 90s. In the 90s. Late 80s. Yeah. He was leading edge technology back in the day. And he still tells us the story today of walking around and, you know, HVAC guys were selling controls and they probably shouldn't have been, but they were. And so he would walk around with a twisted pair of you know, just wire in his back pocket, and he would go around and tell people, you know, this is going to change the world, because he would say it's going to be an explosion of information that's going to come to you. This is back in the late 80s and 90s, and at that point we would call that a revolution. You know, it really did change things. And I think, you know, we were talking about why would we call today's symposium a revolution? And you know, we've been talking about, you know, technology for a bit, and it's you know, the Internet of Things has always kind of been discussion, like the last 10 years or so, like everything talking to each other, and be able to get that information out of each piece of equipment and gear, and mining that information and data to be able to do something with it. But I think, you know, we are at a point where that's come to fruition, and it's a reality. And so when you go back and you look at, you know, the early 90s and this explosion of information that comes out, you know, really what happened. And you know, we still had pneumatic jobs being built, designed, you know, in the 90s, maybe even later. And now is the time when we can't afford, you know, to not look forward, because so much is happening, and it's happening so much faster. And there's a lot of things going out there. You know, there's if you're trying to hire a controls technician, it's probably one of the hardest roles to fill these days. There's just a lack of skilled technicians out there that do it. There's a demand for multiple systems being integrated, and you know, what we want to do today is just make this a really fun discussion of where controls is today. What can we do in our roles in Nashville to affect the HVAC community, the building construction industry, and how can we support our owners and our customers better for their buildings that they're investing a ton of money in, you know, not only for today but also for the future. And what we want to do today is just talk about how that relates to the multiple aspects of the construction industry. And so today we went and we reached out to 4 leaders, in my opinion, in Nashville construction industry. And so we got David Organ, who, I don't know if you've met David. He was probably one of the best controls technicians that I've ever met. And now he's running probably more square footage of buildings than probably anybody I've ever met. And the reason why is because he's with JLL, and he's running all the state buildings for the state of Tennessee. And so David has a wealth of knowledge from a system standpoint and from a building owner and operation standpoint. And then we have Chris Peace with Skanska Construction with us today too. Chris is, if you have any kind of any building over $100 million, Chris has probably done it in Middle Tennessee and elsewhere, and just a wealth of information from the general contracting side of the business. And we have Paul Paul McCown with us today. Paul, I've known Paul for a long time. He was a mechanical engineer in the retro commissioning side. So he went back and he looked at all these buildings that didn't work and tried to make them work. He was in the equipment sales business. He was actually with that Mechanical Resource Group for a bit and did an excellent job for us. Moved back to Knoxville and then started consulting engineering again. And Paul's got a wealth of knowledge as well. David Sefton's done a lot of really big mechanical jobs. He's our mechanical contractor that's representing us today on our panel. And David's done a tremendous amount from a new construction standpoint to retrofit to converting pneumatic jobs to EDC controls to newer technologies and such. And so what we wanted to do today was just kind of create a lively discussion of where we are in the controls kind of industry, where we think we're going, and then how can we influence that to better serve Nashville and all of our customers and clients. And I think it's a time to ask questions. We want engagement from the audience, and we just want to have fun over the next hour and a half or so. And then our next session, we'll do this for about an hour and a half, and then we'll break for about 10 minutes, and then we'll talk about Mark Mayer with Mechanical Resource Group is going to talk about building systems. He's going to talk about how we look at building automation systems, and then we'll have Distech Controls. Chaz Stevens is going to come up and talk to us about where Distech is going, what they've done, and how they are designing systems for today, for yesterday, and then also looking towards the future. And so, how does that sound for everybody? All right. Tell me if I keep my explosion of information more than I need to. This is actually Cat 5. So I couldn't find a twisted pair right there. I looked hard and I could not find a twisted pair, so I got a Cat 5.
You knew you were going to get corrected.
Yeah, I know. I
think Mark could help you out with that.
Yeah. If anyone wants to look at the actual installation rating on this, there, you are more welcome to. All right, so I'm gonna ask our panelists to introduce themselves and just tell us a little bit about themselves. Just name, title, what you do, and why you're here. And let's start off with David Organ here.
Yep. Thank you. David Organ. I've been with JLL for over 10 years now. I've supported the end user and the building owner my entire career back before JLL. And in my career with JLL is where I got my experience with building automation systems on the AT&T account. And so they've got me very well versed in retro commissioning, sequence of operation, and just the day-to-day struggles that most building technicians deal with. So I've kind of been boots on the ground, seen it from both ends.
My name's Chris Peace, pre-construction director for Mechanical for Skanska. I've managed the Midwest region, but have worked on projects across the U.S. I've been in the industry for a little over 30 years, both on the mechanical contractor side and the CMGC side, and worked on several really interesting projects. Apple headquarters in a little town called Cupertino, Microsoft in Seattle. So, been a few projects, LaGuardia. So there's been a handful of projects that we've looked at and dug into the controls. So I'm super excited to sit here and talk about some of the opportunities and some of the things that we've seen.
Great.
Paul McCown. I'm with Ossie Thomas and Associates, now a Salas O'Brien company, and I'm principal in charge of our Knoxville office. Spent most of my career in Nashville working for Nashville firms. Done a lot of different things as a mechanical engineer over the years. Spent a lot of time sitting on the construction 5-gallon bucket next to the control guy. about making stuff work. Talking about PID loops and gain functions and that kind of stuff. So been in the weeds as much as you can get in the weeds, but also I'm in charge of writing the control specifications and putting everything on a sheet of paper to try to make it right, make it be able to be built right. So run the mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and fire protection side of things for us. We also have a company, or part of our company does low voltage design as well. So security systems, low voltage IT, audio visual. So part of what we were talking about in our presentation, we'll get into some cool stuff that I learned when we were warming up for this on Tuesday. It's really helped kind of change my perspective as to why this is a revolution. So I'm excited to have this discussion today.
Dave Sutton with Bernhard, mechanical contractor here in town, all over the country actually. But I've been in the construction industry for quite a while. Seen a lot of controls. In fact, I'm gonna kind of jump on your story a little bit about the whole twisted pair from the 90s thing.
Yeah.
So one of my first jobs was in 1990 at Western Energy Management in Sacramento, California. I was actually control drawing on AutoCAD. So it's been a hot minute. I've built a lot of buildings. I oversee mechanical construction in Nashville at Bernhard. I've worked at Lee Company for quite a while also in Nashville. Right now I'm on a project that's a very interesting opportunity where we're doing the first energy as a service project in Tennessee down at Murray Regional. It's a very control focused project and we're doing energy upgrades there. So it's very exciting.
We're good. We are so thankful for these guys. We did a dry run on Tuesday, and it was a great discussion. So our hope is that you guys will add to it and ask questions and make it even more fun. We'll go back to our first slide. Is that a good backdrop for everybody? Yeah.
I like it.
All right. So no more slides, right? All right. Ready to dig in?
Let's do it.
All right. So we got an owner, we got a general contractor, we got a mechanical engineer, we got a mechanical contractor. At what point in a construction project do you wake up in a cold sweat worrying about building automation systems?
Day one. Day one. But when you stop and you think about the controls, right, it's the building brains, it's how the building functions. If we're not addressing that day one, we're already late, because we're trying to figure out ahead of time what this building's gonna do, how it's gonna perform, and how we want it to function. And without the controls, we're dead in the water. So for me, it's day one.
And that's from a general contractor,
Yeah.
right? So I've been on a few construction sites and a lot of times the general contractor, the control guy shows up, there's already sheetrock everywhere. And they're like, how am I gonna get all this stuff in? You know? Okay, what about anybody else here?
So as a mechanical contractor, I mean, you're definitely worried from day one, like Chris is saying. It's kind of being proactive with the control contractor to drag them along through the project, whether it be their participation in, the modeling process to make sure wells are in the right place for fab, just going through the whole building, opening their control cabinets, making sure there's something in there, just so when you get to that last moment right before commissioning, you're not sitting there holding the bag. You've got programming done, you can actually deliver a building to an owner and meet expectations. So
The thing that wakes me up is, is it gonna be able to be integrated? Right, so I'm talking about controls when so we have a design process, we do schematic design development, construction documents, and then we deliver those documents. And so the first part of what we do is talk about what type of systems we're gonna have, what kind of controls. Is it gonna be fully integrated controls? Is it gonna be standalone? Is it going to be, do we need to tie into other buildings on campus? Is this an existing building that I've already got dealing with some kind of control system in? And so when we're doing the design, I'm thinking about controls from the first first time I started looking at this project. Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm sorry,
No.
just to weigh in on what Paul's saying, so typically, Paul will get selected, on the design team, put a narrative together, then it gets sent over to us when we get selected as the CM at risk. And so Paul and I are on the very front end, trying to understand what the client is expecting this building to do, and pull that information out so that we can actually address that, cover the costs, cover the particulars of it, and make sure that we're delivering, from day one to the end, delivering what their expectation is.
Yeah.
Within that cost point.
Yeah, I found that if I ask good questions early enough.
Yeah.
Those questions find the right people. But if I wait to ask the questions, sometimes it's too late, to find the right people, because the people that are gonna operate the buildings typically are not the people sitting at the table when the building's being designed. But if I ask the right questions to the people designing, the people that are, in charge of the finances and that kind of thing, and the program, if I ask the right questions, they'll go find the people that are gonna operate this building and ask them those questions, so we can, bring all this together.
And that's probably the most important part, I think, is that collaboration on the front end with those building owners and those end users on how it's gonna operate, because I was always the guy coming in on the tail end on the commissioning, and then you find out sensors are not in the right spot, or the type of dampers that you use, opposed blade versus parallel blades, makes a difference when how you're going to control something for fresh air economizer in winter. Do you have isolation valves on your chiller plants, so you're not going through a dead chiller when you're trying to stay up? All those things you find out at the tail end. It's already a done deal, and then you gotta try to make it work, so. Early on in the project, that you can get that controls discussion going is the best.
Yeah, good. Yeah, well said. All right, so what of that process, what part is the most painful in the construction process when it comes to building automation?
I'll weigh in on this one
Yeah.
too. So, I'm not shy about speaking about this. So the painful part for us is not having that engagement early enough by the client to know what that so all we're doing is guessing that we're providing what the client may need based on the building's purpose, right? So we're just going off of experience, off of best guess, but if that client's not bringing that conversation to us early enough, we're engaging early enough, then we're just kind of going down a path where we don't know where we're gonna end up yet. And then, like you said, it's all of a sudden at the end, the folks that are gonna be managing the building jump in and go, well, wait a minute, this isn't all what I was expecting, right? Now I need you to change all of this, and by the way, the budget's blown. And we got all these problems now, so it's very important to get that conversation going early.
So David, how does it work when the construction team turns it over to you?
Well, sometimes it can be difficult, because it depends on
Are you
the.
being nice?
Anytime you can probably.
Well, it's really understanding the end use of the facility, because sometimes on a piece of paper, you look at what the facility is, and you look at the equipment, you're like, okay, standard office space, but it may not be. It could be a museum space. It could depend on, they may have artifacts that move in and out of display, so each artifact has different temperature and humidity requirements. So that makes a difference. Well, is this system one that's easily adjustable for me as an end user, can I change my set points easily? Without having to go through and truck drive things, put them in operator. So knowing the actual end use of the facility is paramount, I feel like, on the design aspect.
So, tell me about getting, a lot of times I was a general contractor for a little bit. I've been doing this longer than I ever did that now. And, but talk to me about getting that owner operator, that guy that sometimes you hire him 2 months before the job is, David would hire the guy who's actually gonna run the building, but maybe 2 or 3 months before the job's even done. And there's this design, and he has no idea what the design was, had no input on it. And then he's got to make this building go. Talk to me about what that kind of looks like. Dave Sesson's got a little smirk on his face.
So,
Yeah.
it's gracious to hire 2 to 3 months beforehand. Usually it's still 2
Yeah.
weeks, and then we get to the end of a project, and we do owner training. And they all attend owner training, we videotape it, we make a big deal out of it, it's, so much training, 48 hours in a spec, or whatever it is. We do this training, 2 weeks later, we learn the guy quit, and there's a new guy. So all the training was for naught, right? So, now we have continual problems, and you were going to the most painful process, part of the controls construction. It's usually the year after you're done with construction. And all the new people getting involved in the control system and trying to train everyone, get everyone up to speed on how to operate a building.
That person that quit didn't have ownership of this thing.
Yeah.
Not at all,
They
right?
had no investment.
Never started with Paul and Chris at the beginning. Just kind of got thrown into it.
Well, so there's a crux of the issue is at that commissioning, that getting everything turned on, getting it right. And it's difficult. So I did for much of my career, about 10 years, I did third party commissioning. I was out in the field doing stuff work. And, it is rare that you have a design that's perfect, that gets handed off to a contractor that installs it perfectly, that gets handed off to a team of people that gets it turned on and started up perfectly, that gets it handed over to, right? Does that ever happen? And so, at some point, these projects, at some point, either you get in and you make it like somebody, a team of somebody's, right? The team of the SEALs that come in there at the end, right? They get in there and they either make it work, or you have a team of people that comes in and it gets it good enough to where everybody believes it works. And then whether you figure that out later or not, it is what it is. And it is a difficult process. It's a lot of figuring stuff out and making it work. It's a lot of variables to make it right.
So David Organ, how easy is it to hire somebody that knows how to run a system when the job has been completed? Or
Very difficult. To have somebody to truly run a system, you've got to have somebody that has at least a basic understanding of the automation systems, how things should operate, and then the mechanical aspect, how should it operate? You click this button, it turns that off and on, okay, but why does it turn that off and on? What part of the sequence should it be turning that off and on? That's the key understanding that we're missing, I feel like. People push buttons all day long, I see that, and it messes everything up, taking it out of operating, or taking it out of I see that, but they don't understand, all I know is I push this button and my problem goes away.
Yeah.
But when you do that, you're affecting everything else now, it's no longer an automatic.
Just this
That's
last
still-
just this last week, I was on, we've had an issue with a building that's just, when you look at the trend data on the chill water system, it's going from 40 degrees to 54 degrees, and in fact, within 2 hours. And the whole building is just cycling like this. And I said, this is, and the control guy, we've been on the phone with the control guys, been talking to the control guys for months. And they keep saying, it's what's the equipment issue, or it's a design issue, whatever. I said, look, if I have to come out there and sit down with you and show you how to fix this, you're not gonna be in my spec anymore. Like you get time to figure this out. Or if I have to come sit down and figure it out, that's not what I do, right?
How much time do they have?
That was, well, that's over, they had 2 months.
Oh, yeah.
They had 2 months to get it right, and I kept saying in the meetings, are you using derivative control? And they would say, no. I said, well, you probably need it, right, for this type of system. And then this and that. And so once we were out there, I said, please program derivative control on your control valves. I said, they're hunting. I mean, I could sit here and watch it in 2 minutes. It's going from 20% to 80%. I mean, this isn't like, it's not gonna work. And it's just those kind of things that what we're all seeing, what I'm seeing and what I think we're all seeing is we need more people that are trained to understand what is happening. And we're having less, like, we get more and more complicated control systems, right? With more and more requirements from code that I have to put in from the energy code, right? Somebody's looking at, am I doing demand control ventilation, resets, static pressure resets, and temperature resets, all these kind of things that I gotta put in the control system. And then we've got a team of people that we handed over to that they're not getting the training from the industry to be able to be handling these systems and understand what they're even doing, right?
So that leads me to another, it's like, what can we, what can the building automation industry do to help support owners, engineers, contractors through that period, to help support a building or an operator?
I mean, it's either good, my personal opinion is it's either gonna go one of two ways. Either trade organizations and trade agencies that help do training, right, and help this industry are either gonna step up with training and assistance and be able to bring up qualified people to implement these things. Or artificial intelligence is gonna absolutely be applied like it is in multiple industries right now. It's gonna be applied to take care of these things, and the operator itself is just gonna be an artificial intelligence engine that somebody says I'm hot or cold, and it assesses why that might be, and tells, and then spits out a report to somebody that can go and change a filter or check a temperature or whatever, right? It's not gonna be a human making adjustments in the system unless these people are better trained.
Dave Session, you talked about like the owner training. What is it, like a 45-minute video?
So it ends up being a 45-minute video.
I'm so glad we always record that because everybody always goes back and watches.
Well, even when I'm trying to go back, usually it's done, usually they do it in the chiller room where you can't hear the. And you know, like, why
Well, half the time we bring a video camera and then we don't use it.
Yeah.
We all just sit around the BAS central station. This is what you do here.
Yeah.
So,
And it gets rescheduled like 6 times because nobody
at
could.
least 6 times.
So how much easier would your job be if that training period from the building automation provider was longer?
So, I don't know if longer, because the type of people that operate buildings don't have the attention span for a long period of time. You know, to sit there and find out every nuance of a control system in 8 hours. So, one of the things that discussion-wise came out is kind of like this periodic training, where, you know, you get into the control system, and you get an introduction to it, and then possibly 3 months later, after the operators have time to go through it, you have another training where there's key parts where they can actually focus on what that operator needs. And, you know, just keep on a regularly scheduled basis, just trying to help guys truly understand what they're doing.
I've found, like, when I speak to the guys that are operating these buildings, that the guy that's like has authority and a login of some kind of level, and I talked to him about, like, this past week when the project I was on, I said, why are you trying to run the building and all these at 50 degrees? Like, you've got everything, all your air distribution at 50 degrees. Like, we've designed it for 55. I said, so, but you're operating it at 50. I said, why is that? He said, well, I don't want to have humidity issues and this kind of thing. Well, he's having humidity issues because the chillers keep shutting off, right? Because the building's not tuned. And so his solution was to just lower the discharge air temps to try to mitigate that, which is, I mean, that's along the right train of thought. But I said, look, if you're just gonna go to 50, now you're causing tremendous amount of additional energy in this building. He said, no. I said, look, all these boxes, all these reading boxes, all the heat is gonna have to run 5 degrees more than it would. And he said, I said, you've got heat on right now. He said, no, I don't have any heat on. I said, let's go look. I said, let's just go look right now. And we pulled up and I said, look, there's a fan coil unit, right? I mean, this is a fan powered VAV box with electric heat. I said, the fan is running, right? I said, what does that mean? He said, oh, I don't think that. I said, you've got 50 degrees coming in the box. We've got 60 degrees coming out of the box. I said, the fan is the first stage of heat. And the control guy was there and said, tell him what they eat, and it was calling for 22% heating.
I bet he loves you.
I don't, like,
So the Christmas card list.
it's for me, when people wanna argue about something just for the sake of arguing, it's like, no, let's just go to the data. Let's just let the data speak for itself, right? And it's just, it's
That's
difficult. It's
Yeah.
difficult.
David Organ, what do you think about Dave Sexton's idea of a continuous periodic training?
I think that's what we need, continuous training, not just of how to operate an automation system, but understanding mechanical systems as a whole. You understand how to control it better, and how, when you're driving a set point down to 50, that bigger trickle-down effect of how it affects everything else, you've got to understand it system-wide.
Yeah, maybe a disconnect, right? You got folks that are good in tech.
Yep.
You have folks that understand HVAC.
Yeah.
Maybe the two aren't really being brought together.
You gotta have both.
Yeah.
Because you don't understand what you're really doing.
Yeah.
When you're changing those set points.
If you wanna be good, you gotta do both.
Yeah.
Correct.
So, that's great. I wanted to just, a show of hands, how many building owners do we have in the room, guys running buildings? All right, how many engineers have in a room? Okay, guys designing jobs. And then how many contractors? Okay, all right, good. Is there anything that you guys want to specifically try to get out of this discussion that we might come back to? Yeah.
With regard to what they're talking about with training, I completely agree. I'm Peter Heimbach with the state. The question that we always come to when we end up with suggestions like that is, because of the way we have to write contracts, we're bound by capital dollars versus operational dollars. How do you marry the two in that environment? Because I can't have 2 years worth of training or on-call training, because then from Skanska's perspective, now I've opened your bond for that 2 years to keep it under your contract. So how do I do that and provide the level of training that you're asking for, that I agree that is needed? How do I do that in the framework of construction contracts versus operational agreements?
And I can't say I know the answer to that, because it hasn't been figured out yet. But it's a good question.
It was a good question.
Yeah.
I think it's more, that's a difficult question but it depends on who needs the training.
Or who's
Right.
giving the training.
So are you taking and plugging somebody into the building that has a fundamental understanding of what we're doing? And it has, right? It has some industry-wide training, it has some credentials. Or are you just taking somebody who volunteered, right? Or somebody who their division in the state got, whatever because of this budget, and it's like they're good people and they need a job, and you just grab them and just plug them in here, and now they need way more training. So it's kind of like, who needs the training and what level of training do they need?
And I
it
guess
varies building project.
From my perspective, you're talking about two different types of training. 'Cause
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I've got an advantage. I've got David.
That's right.
And I expect in his contract that he is providing a basic level of training to his employees. What I'm talking about is the building specific training, because as we all know, each building is a unique animal. And it's the issues with the specific building, not the general issues with the automation system typically that are the problem. Like you were talking about running it at 50 degrees instead of 55 degrees. That's a building specific issue, but it speaks to a larger training issue. But if they had been trained on the specific building, they would potentially understand the sequence of operations and make better decisions.
Well, that's the segue to opening up the conversation from just HVAC, right? Which is what I primarily deal with, to security, lighting,
Yeah.
and all these other building automation things that we can talk about, and that we can talk about integrating, that don't often get figured out until you're in the building. You're like, it would have been nice, da 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 da, right? It sure would have been nice. Well, that's why we're having the symposium, is because we want to know the should have been nice's so that we can start working on those now.
All right. Yeah, we're probably, if we keep doing questions, we're gonna go way over on time, so.
Real quick,
Okay, yeah,
Kelly
yeah.
Manning, Holly Properties. Another opportunity as it relates to the operational dynamics is you got a preventative maintenance program generally following these pieces of equipment.
Right.
You got the first year of warranty, you could build
Yeah.
training into that dynamic. As the PM programs progress, maybe you add some training into that
Yeah.
period of time where, maybe it's an add to the PM program, or we can add training to this, but you're going to have some preventative maintenance through the lifespan of the property.
Yeah.
Maybe that's your opportunities to build it into that
Maybe-
program.
Tell me your first name again.
Peter.
If Peter were to ask me that question, I could answer from a relationship and business relationship standpoint. But from a contractual standpoint, when you have other people involved, like a general contractor, mechanical contractor, where their term has to end at some point.
Right.
Legally, I can't answer his question. I can't answer Peter's question as clearly for that. But if I have a relationship with the owner and a prior relationship with them, and that's negotiated up front, or if there's some way to put that in the specification somewhere, I think that can be baked into the job.
That's right.
So,
That could be add-on, you line item it. It'll probably be cut most likely, but.
right.
Well, and I will say this, we have seen an uptick in that requirement, right? We're seeing more and more specifications come out that say, hey, instead of 1 year warranty, I want 3-year warranty, I want 5-year warranty. I want you to commit to this system and support for a longer period of time because we just don't have the people or don't have the resources to do it.
Well, building budgets on an annual basis, that's what I've done my whole life, and you can build that into a budget.
Sure.
If it's that important, you can convince the owner that it's that important.
That's good. All right, thank you, Peter and Kelly. Guys, appreciate it. All right, so we're gonna go on to the next one. We're talking about industry awareness, owner involvement. And so this is somewhat of a loaded question. How vocal are owners in influencing their VAS system that they're in, having to operate?
I'll say that it depends. It really depends. So, if I have an owner who's savvy enough to understand their systems and know what they want, then they'll be very vocal. I have some clients that may just be developers that are only interested in the basics. You make sure it works, I make sure I can sell the building, and we move on. So it really depends on the client. And we get into some of the institutional projects that those, they're owning, operating for, 50 years. They wanna understand it and they know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And so it's very important for them to be vocal on what their expectation is.
Yeah.
And the more we can get that, the better off we are in supporting that.
Well said. Those are two very different owners.
Very different.
Yeah.
I wish the more vocal, the better.
Mhm.
I mean, always. And so, if we're dealing with a hotel client, they're gonna be extremely vocal. If we're designing a hotel, they're gonna know what system they want, what they want at the front desk, whether it ties in all the others, the rooms and what level that is. And we're getting into the absolute weeds during the design to make sure that all of these systems communicate. Whereas, in a typical project, we ask questions, a lot of projects, they don't even know what question we're asking.
Right.
They're gonna go find the truth, right? And so it just varies.
Yeah, so going back to like those speculative, owners, those guys that are trying to flip something and invest some money on it. How well informed do you think they are? And do you think that they're, I guess my question would be, are they leaving, because they could be leaving money on the table by the way they're designing their VAS system, from a value proposition standpoint that they could ultimately resell. When you start thinking about where building automation systems are going, how you can get information and data out of it, how it can be leveraged for more uses and have a higher value further on. So I'm wondering, I guess I'm already answering my question.
Well, not necessarily.
They're not educated enough, but
Well, but
how can we get them to the point where they understand kind of what they could be doing on the table?
Well, they don't, those type of clients don't necessarily need it. Often, so let's talk about like a mid-rise or a condo project. So you've got two different ways to do it. You've got a whole lot of individual, rooms that are all together, or you integrate the whole building-wide systems. Lots of individual exhaust fans in every room, OA direct to the room, kitchen exhaust, like all this stuff is independent to every room. Well, that type of system doesn't really need much in terms of control. And that's more speculative. Yeah, that's the more speculative that is good, they're gonna flip it and that kind of stuff. Whereas somebody that's building these that understands and they're gonna own it for a while, they're gonna have one centralized exhaust system. They're gonna have multiple, they're gonna have a centralized exhaust for the toilets and bathrooms and a separate one for the dryer and the exhaust. And then the outside air is gonna come in, they're gonna have all this integrated. And then they're gonna need that building automation system to control all that. So it's really two different types of projects and ownership.
I will weigh in on this one from the standpoint of, so we have a development arm at Skanska. And so we actually develop, build, and possibly sell, depending on what they want to do with that building on the market at the time. But there is a value add to those buildings when we do take it another level for, I'll call it integration, right? So people pull into the parking lot, the phone already is recognizing that the person's there. The lights are turning on in their apartment, it's doing this. So they're already, there's a value add there when they get ready to sell that. It's gonna be a higher price point when they go to sell it than your, just regular speculative building.
Yeah.
So there is a value add
Yeah.
to doing that, but not all owners understand that,
Oh, yeah. Yeah, higher complexity.
Yeah. and developers.
All right, that's all. Thank you guys for that. Real quick, almost a one-sentence response. Hindsight 2020. What's the number one thing that you wish your owner told you back in the design phase that you realize at the end that you kind of look over like, man, if you told me that 2 years ago, my life would be a lot easier. Anything?
I've got an example, but I don't know if I can get it into one sentence.
Well, take my sentence.
So, and David is well aware of this, so on Fifth and Broad.
Yeah.
That we built
Yeah,
there. Well, so the client expressed an interest in not just building controls, but building integration, right? And that conversation has to happen way earlier than, yes. And we kept pushing, so they made the comment, we'd like that, right?
Yeah.
Oh, but we need to focus on foundations, we need to focus on structure, we need to focus on, so they kept kicking that can down the road. And then when they finally got done with that, they go, oh, now let's talk about what integration looks like. Like, oh, that boat has sailed, but now they want it, and we've got to try to help them achieve that. And that was extremely difficult. I wish I had been able to have that conversation much sooner with them to be able to smoothly integrate what their expectation was. Now we were doing it kind of in a vacuum behind the design.
Because the opportunity is always there.
Yes.
So,
Well, for me, I wish you'd have told me that you were gonna operate your building like that, or you wanted this room to operate like that, right? And so a lot of times it comes, I think that owners, a lot of times they think, well, maybe we will, maybe we won't, but at least let's have this conversation. But when I think they've started having the conversation enough, that they're like, oh my gosh, it's so much more expensive if I want, you know what I mean? And so they think, if we don't have the conversation, I'm speculating, if we don't have the conversation with the engineer and the design team, then we'll let them do design the system, and then we'll be able to operate it how we want without having to pay for all this extra stuff that they think we need, right? And so then we don't have the conversation, then we get in there and I'm like, hey, where did all of these people, like, what are you doing in here? Like, no, we didn't design it like this. And then all of a sudden they're like, well, we thought it would work. It's like, well, we gotta have a conversation. And a lot of times it's like, they decided to make an exhibit hall and put some art up, right? That's a very common thing in a lot of these places, a lot of these buildings. And then the art comes with all this contract that you have to sign to be able to have the art and display it. And then they send it to me. Hey, will our building do this? And I'm like, no. And they're like,
I see big organizations out there, dude.
Well, I was very much on the tail end after the construction, but you get with some clients and they're like, well, we'd like to go for some LEED certification, you know? Well, it's been nice to know that when you build your mechanical and control system, because the system you got can't achieve what you're wanting. When you try, it's just not there to get it.
Yeah, that's a good one. You run, you gotta operate in museums.
Yeah.
How's that?
It can be tough, but it was designed with that purpose in place. So I'll say our museum is a good example, but some places where you retrofit an existing structure and turn it into lab environments, things like that, it can be tough to get that end result that you're looking for.
Yeah. Good. All right. I want to move on to the next question, and somewhat applicable to today. I woke up this morning and on my phone that said, national, cybersecurity attack. Was it crowd strikes? Those guys, man. If there's ever I think they were in the DNC thing and scandal when they stole all the emails or whatever. These guys, they can't win. And I was like, how often are we? What does that conversation look like with owners and cybersecurity when you're talking about building automation systems? Like, what does that look like? I mean, remember, like right after the whole Target scandal when they got in, hacked Target or whatever. Everyone was scared to death to put their building automation system online. So, I mean, that was probably 10 years ago or so. I mean, what does that conversation look like today?
That still comes up in conversations today. Everybody focuses on the market, and that's why they're reluctant to tie HVAC system in with their local network. But for us, it behooves us to have that external access, but it's like pulling teeth to get them to buy into it.
Yes, go ahead, Paul.
well, I don't understand. I mean, again, we talked about this week. I don't understand why it's so difficult. I don't understand the hardware. I mean, yes, the industry has had an exposure, right? Because the people tunneling in through the building automation system get through the firewall and that kind of thing, which is good, right? That just brings to light, like, it's important to have, good protections there, just like you do everywhere else. But there's way more employees that just, go on a website and take their personal information, and log in, and then it gets captured that way.
That's much more of a risk.
It's much more of a risk. So are we just gonna stop hiring people? Like, just stop it? No, you just gotta figure it out, right?
So people are the risk.
People are a bigger risk.
People are the problem.
Statistically speaking, the employee is a much bigger risk than building up these systems.
It is still discussed, but I agree with Paul.
Are people still scared of it, or are they looking past it?
Well, when you have things like today, right, it'll raise that
Yeah.
question again and start that discussion on the front end much sooner.
All right.
I mean, but it's just, then you say, well, do you want the added expense of having this separate, completely separate, system? Or do you want to just give a core system with a firewall? It's just
So if anybody has a customer that has cybersecurity problems, just have them call Paul.
I don't have the answer.
He'll eliminate all HR problems.
Perspective.
All right, next question. I want to talk about building automation and its effect on construction projects, scheduling, programming. What does that look like? You know, because it feels like at the end of the job, you always get to the point where, you know, everybody's waiting on the control guy, right? He's got the whole world on the back of his shoulder. But is it really his fault? You know,
Yes.
talk about that a little bit.
He's not at the panel right now, right?
Oddly enough, we're talking about controls and building control guy here.
The control guy gets the rest of the day to fix all of what we say, right?
Yeah, don't break our tables. That's a highly constructed table.
But I mean, projects are complex. There's a lot of trades in the projects, you know, that are sequential in getting a building built. And yes, controls are last. A lot of times you have to have an operating network within the building for the controls to integrate to the network to even complete. But there's things you can do along the way to be proactive and, you know, kind of went over it earlier, to just engage with your control contractor and make sure they're involved in the project. You know, there's very limited resources for all trades across the nation.
Yeah.
And I mean, controls is no different. So if you can't use that resource when it's required and you try and use that resource at the end instead, you're at the mercy of them being available.
How often do you see the control guy pulling the wire and
Never.
waving the wire? Well, listen.
Subbed out, right?
Okay, well, there you go. So it's subbed out, so the same guy pulling the wires is different than the guy programming.
That's right.
Yeah.
So that leads me to the next question, and that is so everybody knows there's a huge shortage of qualified control technicians out there. And so are we seeing more and more of that programming and stuff shipped overseas and coming back and if we are seeing more of that, how does that affect the end of the job and turning that over? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I mean, there are some vendors that are shipping it overseas.
Yeah.
We know that for a fact, we've seen it.
That's gonna make it even more difficult.
It is.
It's like handing somebody, you know, an Excel program that I designed and say, here, this works, and I hand it to them, and then they try to do their own personal finances or whatever. Hey, man, it's gonna take them months to figure out what I even did, right? So, like the person programming it, if they do the majority of the work, like that's helpful for them to tweak it on the fly, right? If a sensor wasn't exactly installed in the spot that they thought it was and this kind of thing. Because it needs to match the building. That's the biggest difficulty of what we do. Is even, like, there are very, very few buildings that are exactly the same, like even a Walmart, right? They have a few different versions of a Target or whatever, but even those buildings, you pick it up and you take a building, you can't do the same one that you did in Florida, in New Mexico, or in, you know, you have to change it. So there's no such thing as a car that comes off the assembly line. They're the same in every state, but even with the building, they have to change because we have a different outdoor environment. And so that makes it and then you take everything we're doing, it makes it very difficult because it's a one-off every time. It's brand new every time.
That's good. So that somewhat leads me, and we talked about it previously a bit, of just the overall complexity of integration of systems and making them all go. And, you know, we started talking about, we started talking about the Internet of Things like 10 years ago, and everyone's like, there's no way my toaster is going to talk to me when I look at it, right? There's no way that I can actually like tell Alexa to order something and it's actually going to show up. So we started talking about that really early. It felt like to me, it was like, when's this ever going to show up? Well, it's here. And so now, are we seeing all these things really starting to talk to each other? and do our owners expecting all these systems to be integrated on a single platform or working together? Are we talking about like a building calendar that talks to, so if you schedule a room and then, you know, the AC doesn't come on for that single room until that there's something scheduled on the calendar, or fire alarm is, you know, are we seeing fire alarms, lighting, integrated more security cameras and stuff? You know, we started talking about that about 10 years ago, and it was like, man, this never ever gonna work. Is it working, and are we seeing more of that?
Yeah, it's here.
Yeah.
So, again, going back to the conversation of the type of owner, right? We see clients like our hospital owners and a lot of those that are seeing the value in those integrated systems. You know, asset management, all of that really kind of helps in wayfinding, scheduling, all of those things are built into kind of a single platform. Are we there yet? It's a work in progress, because I don't think anybody's really perfected it yet, but there are a lot of folks looking at it.
Yeah.
Right? And there's a lot of discussion around it.
Yeah.
But we are still, and I don't mean this as a disrespect to the design community, but if that client's not expressing that expectation day one, you know, you're designing HVAC. The electrical designer's designing electrical. The low voltage is designing low voltage. Never the three shall cross paths unless that discussion is had and we are actually all sitting in the same room understanding what that expectation is and how do we make it work, right? Because he's concerned about making sure the HVAC is doing what he needs it to do to perform. The electrical engineer's doing the same thing, right? Then you've got another vendor that's doing security for that client and has never had a conversation with the design team. You know, they've always bought that separately. You know, so it's trying to get all of that orchestrated to come together and everybody be on the same page, and it seldom happens.
What's the coolest integration you've seen that does work?
Well, so right now we're working on a project in Oregon.
Okay.
It's a new hospital. I won't say the brand,
Yeah.
but it is very much every one of those things I just mentioned. They are tagging the pieces of equipment. They are making it so that when you actually have to come into the hospital, you click on the button on your phone and it gives you the wayfinding, it gives you the schedule, it goes through all of it. So it's very much being proposed and instituted, but it's not an everyday thing.
Yeah.
I think we're gonna see more of it. We're gonna see more expectation for it. Because let's face it, when you're at home and you wanna do the stuff on your apps, right? And you're wanting the shades to close and you want what's in my refrigerator when I'm at the grocery store, right? So I mean, it's all those expectations are there at home. Now the business owners are starting to say, why don't I have this here? And as a design and construction community, we're not embracing that just yet.
Yeah.
And we've had history where things didn't work properly, right? When we tried that and it failed because the technology wasn't there.
Well, that's the thing, somebody's gotta take the risk.
Yeah.
Right, somebody's gotta take the risk, and it's difficult for, for an engineer just to take the risk without buying from
Engineers love risk.
Yeah, no, we're extreme, like, you're very risk averse, as an industry.
Yep.
But the coolest thing, the coolest integrations that I've seen as far as getting into the weeds on it, so is fresh air. So we have to put fresh air into the buildings, right? And tying in fresh air, like we do calculations based on people and based on a marker, which is CO2, but the code doesn't even really, it's gray area for us to do that. That actual occupant count is what the code is based on. And so if you can if at any point in the building, you can know where occupants, how many people are there, where they are in the building, then you direct the outside air to them based on how many are there, right? And so then that right there would be the the best, and it is happening, a little bit, but it's not fully, but that would be, be able to direct, talk about, outside air is the biggest energy expense in the HVAC system, right, as far as the production of
Yeah.
that. So being able to dial it in based on the actual occupants would be, is tremendous.
I think the most common thing that we're seeing is maybe like just calendar schedule tied to BAS, just when based on, room occupancy.
Those energy efficiency.
Yeah, and then the other thing that was somewhat that is out of the box, I would say, was this sex project at the Atlanta airport where they tagged the wheelchairs because they thought that was a bottleneck of getting passengers off the gates. And then they used, zigbee through the lighting system, I think, is that right? To figure out where the wheelchairs were, to locate them and then be able to get them out there.
Yep.
But so, I guess my leading question is, and Paul's gonna ask you this, and you said it first, with AI, everyone loves talking about AI, and however you want to define that. But I think do you think we're gonna start seeing this stuff faster and coming out? And then how do you think that's gonna affect design from owners leaning towards maybe an open system versus a closed system or more proprietary system? You got any insight or visionary into that, or I'll let you pontificate first.
Yeah, well, you got multiple questions at the time. I'm thinking the personnel, right? Engineers coming out of school, I just had a conversation with a young engineer that I hired this past week, and he used a term that I hadn't heard before. When I was like, hey, why are you taking so many breaks? What's going on? What do you like? And he goes, well, I get decision fatigue. And I was like, wow, that's what it is. And I'm like, okay.
I'm taking medication.
Artificial intelligence doesn't get decision fatigue. Okay, so literally, I'm like, help
Can
me.
you tell me what was the biggest threat to your business?
I'd say,
Okay, yeah, keep going.
so, but I'm having to, I would love to be able to offer artificial intelligence and that kind of thing, but it's just not here yet. In certain industries it is, okay? Airlines, with all the things and what's going on behind the scenes with airlines and with cruise ships, and they've got, so my father-in-law does this type of design and sales. They have companies that, on a cruise ship, right? Bear with me for how to say it like this. There's all kinds of different communication protocols on a cruise ship. And you're on a cruise ship and you want to use the internet, right? So they're getting that internet to you 4 different ways. You've got Elon Musk with the Starlink, and you've got all these other communication protocols that they're getting you internet. Artificial intelligence, based on where these cruise ships are going and how they're going, right, are learning when to switch from one to the other, based on every change in conditions. Instead of having a human sitting there looking at it going, well, we just fell off, I probably need to switch this. Now, artificial intelligence is starting to switch it before you even drop off, right? Because artificial intelligence has figured out when we go through this channel and we have this weather or whatever, then we lose this signal, we need to switch. This is gonna be the strongest signal, right? So that's already happened. Cruise ships and airlines for giving all this stuff to us, right? So those are the kind of decisions that, could somebody that's highly trained, that has looked at that, yes, they could sit there and do that and plan for that, but it's very, very expensive over the long term, right? And so these are the kind of things that with buildings, we're gonna see okay, there's a storm this morning, when do we need to do startup and how do we need to have everything done, right? So instead of nothing happening, instead of the building not being comfortable when you come in, whatever, artificial intelligence, if it's taking all that information in, can hone that building in based on comfort and energy efficiency both, right? So that's what's coming eventually, right? I thought it would already be here for our industry. Our industry typically lags other industries because I'm writing the specs, but my other coach, we are very risk averse. We're not gonna take a risk to give you something as an owner that we don't have the money, we're not spending the money. So unless the owner says, Paul, figure this out. If the owner comes to me and says, Paul, I want you to figure this out for me, and I'm, they're on board with it, like, I will figure it out for them. But I can't put like, hey, do you want this, do you want this? If they're not willing to say, yeah, let's give it a shot, I can't just do it, right? So that's kind of the what happens in our industry. It's like, you find the right engineers, paired with the right contractor, with the right owners to do these new risky type of things, potentially, right? To be able to realize what we're all talking about.
Yeah, I think it's great. It opens up to everybody. It's like, what needs to change from like, if we gotta change something, probably the spec has to change, right? Maybe, or how we look at it, or how we evaluate it.
Absolutely.
Systems.
Well, the reason our specs don't change very often is the spec that I needed when I first started my career, and the first project I did was the Houston Rockets Arena in 2001, and we were doing commissioning on that and getting it up to speed, right? Very complicated DDC system. I don't need a different spec for that. It's the same spec. It's the same spec. There's nuances to, like, if owners want something, whatever. But as far as the pieces and parts of making it work, and making sure it's all there, and again, risk averse. Building automation systems haven't changed enough on the HVAC side. From when I did the Houston Rockets Arena in 2001, it's the same system, right? There's not a whole lot extra there from if you only look at HVAC. But as soon as we open this up to beyond HVAC and beyond one owner to another owner, right? And beyond just that one thing. As soon as you open that up and look more, then all of a sudden that does change their perspective a lot.
Yeah, it does.
And that's when the specs need to change. It's significant.
And that's what we're gonna talk about in this next session here, is okay, so DDC controls came out in late 80s, early 90s, and our explosion of information, but we still had pneumatic control specs out there, right? We're still actively building specs. So, how are we looking as construction leaders, industry leaders, building automation leaders, HVAC leaders in the industry, and this, I'll make this rhetorical because we'll be running out of time and it can continue to the next conversation. But how do we need to talk about things to kind of future-proof ourselves for buildings that owners can get their ultimate value out of the dollars they spend per square foot into something that could possibly be integrated with something that hasn't even been designed yet. Some kind of widget, some kind of application, something that hasn't even been taken to market yet. And I think that is a worthy conversation. I know we will talk about that in just a bit. So I want to wrap this up with one final question for you guys, and then that'll give us enough time for some Q&A from the audience. Regarding building automation systems, in y'all's career, from an owner, general contractor, engineer, mechanical contractor, what's the one lesson learned that you want to share with the audience?
I'll take that one. I'll do mine first. I would say that communication is the one thing that we've got to make sure that we're having with all the stakeholders involved. There are, and I'll say this maybe because I've seen a little bit more, but there's solutions out there that we haven't even tapped yet, right? They're in development, they're working, they've been beta tested, they're there. And we haven't even really seen those come to fruition in the market 100%. But we've got to have that communication and understand, what do you want to do with this building? How do you want it to operate? Do you want it to be future-proof, right? Because now we need to do that. We don't need to continue to build buildings the same way we did back in the 80s, right? The technology is too advanced. The expectation is too advanced to say, let's just keep doing what we're doing because it works, right? The owners and the clients are like, that's not good enough for me. And if you're gonna keep doing that, go to the back of the bus. I need somebody who's on the front edge that will help me achieve my goal to get to where I need to be, to future-proof my building and make sure that I'm integrating what the next level is, right? So having that communication though and understanding, it's not important to the developer who's gonna flip that building, right? He wants to finish building it as cheap as possible, sell it, get out. He could care less, right? But that hospital owner who wants to own and operate that building for the next 50 years is absolutely looking at that, right? I'm gonna build this building and it's gonna operate the same way it did back in the 80s? I don't think so, right? So for us, we've gotta have that communication and understand that expectation.
Yeah, and I just build on what Chris is saying, it's just keep an open mind. There's a different way to do things than we've always done them. And I think you gave a little exposure of it today, but I've finally had the experience of this open protocol type systems, and it's been kind of eye-opening, kind of fits right into integration, future proofing the applications. So without being too shameful on a plug here, but I just keep an open mind. It will get better.
What's education? I mean, that's the key. Is what matters, right? Ask the right questions so you figure out what matters. And then if there's not enough information to support what matters, then go get the information. Which is what you guys do a lot. You do these symposiums and open this up so that more people can get more knowledge in the local industry as a whole, right? And that's a critical component of being able to make industry change that helps everybody, right? Not just, and ultimately the end user. Because we're all doing it, like most of what we do, we go do it, we set it up, we walk away, and we may never go in the building again. Somebody else is gonna use that. We're not doing this for us. Rarely, right?
And that communication is great on the front end, understanding, but from my perspective, on the back end, it's the ongoing training. You can build a great building and everything's great, but if you don't hand it off to people that understand how to manage it, maintain it, and run it, it's all for naught. So I think that ongoing training from our industry is where we need to focus also.
Yeah. Remember a guy that was in charge of building a bunch of hospitals, and he joked that we build these spaceships and then we hand them off to people and don't even train them how to.
Yep.
Yeah. So, anything else? Before we open up the questions. Nope. All right. Question time. Anybody got anything? Bruce.
Yeah, I'm gonna jump into with what you just finished there.
Yeah.
As a customer, a lot of the challenges we have is we have engineers, designers come in, and our people in our metro schools who are sitting down with them to say, this is what we want, may not have reached down to the people who are gonna be working on this system. And we have a tendency of listening to our designers, engineers, and getting the biggest bells and whistles, but we don't have the people to take care of it. And then at the same time, we don't have the capacity financially to take care of it. So everything we did usually it's LEED certified is our goal. Everything we did to try to get LEED certified is then unplugged a year later, disconnected, we changed the whole thing out to a new system, whatever the case may be, because we didn't ask those questions on the front end. So the question is, when do you ask the customer, do you have the capacity to maintain this system? And how are you gonna maintain the system once we put it in? Because a year later, when the installers walk away, we're stuck with it. And it is really difficult. And with 160 buildings, I have a potential for 160 different systems. It's impossible. So that's my question on your all side. is that question ever asked from you all? And, you know, when does that come into play?
It comes into play on every, like, I don't ever provide more complicated controls than what's absolutely required by code. Okay, so for instance, code allows dry bulb economizer, right? Then you can do multiple enthalpy type economizers for even more efficiency, whatever. My experience is a dry bulb sensor stays calibrated way better than having to do all these multiple enthalpy, sensors and that kind of stuff, the humidity and all that. So as long as the code allows me to do a dry bulb economizer, that's what I'm gonna do. Unless an owner or somebody comes in and says, no, we understand that we have to do 6-month calibrations on these sensors if we're gonna expect to maintain the energy efficiency that we gain from these things. And we have a program and a protocol to keep all these sensors calibrated. I want an enthalpy economizer, right? Otherwise, most owners are gonna get a dry bulb economizer designed for me. They don't even know. They don't even sophisticate to have the people that are operating it to even ask what the difference is or understand it, right? And so it's just education all along the way. So when somebody asks me for more, usually they already know the implication of that, right? And so that's just one example of, just blow that out across everything that we did, right? I designed the code minimum unless somebody says otherwise, that they want something more.
I wish there were more like you out there.
You should end it now.
Okay, exit statement.
To your point though, it is very much a question that we ask because, again, we go back to, we're handing this building to you, right? And you need to understand how, and if you can, own and operate it. If you even have the staff to manage it, to service it, what does all that look like, right? Because the last thing we want to do is give you a building you can't maintain, right? You can't manage. So it does no good on either side to do that, right? So we absolutely want to ask that question and understand, do you have a maintenance staff? Not you necessarily, but yeah, Mr. Client, do you have a maintenance staff and what's that look like? Do they understand DX and DX only? Or do they understand chill water? And we start getting into that conversation. How does this building need to function to support you as the client and your maintenance team, if you have one?
John, I'm gonna play devil's advocate a little bit on that. As a previous owner, the issue we had is if you go down to that level of the maintenance guy in the building, they're gonna want pneumatics. Because that's what they're comfortable with. And if you don't push them and the organization, you'd still be putting pneumatics in right now. Now, to Paul's point, we'd be a lot safer because we would have all this issue with people hacking into our system. They'd have to hack into our air compressors, but we would.
Yeah, you can have a system you want to send people.
That's right. So we,
And I think where we fall short a lot of times is we want the bells and whistles, but we don't tie in the cost and what we need to get our people either trained or hired to take care of them, or we hire a contract or put money aside to hire the vendors to come take care of it.
The money is the key. What you're talking about, okay, I've
100%.
been dealing with this for over a decade, right? The money that you save in energy doesn't come back to the
never.
source of the savings.
Never.
Yeah.
Right? And so then it's like, what if that, like, right? Then it's human nature, like, why am I going through all this effort?
Mhm.
Right? That's just human nature. So to be able to go from silos that we talked about, be able to go from these silos of the building spend, the capital spend is here, and then the maintenance spend is here, and then the energy spend is all the way over here in a completely separate thing.
And never they cross paths.
They're completely like they've got to be integrated so that they all share from the same pocket, right? So if you save here, then benefits here and here, all along the way, right? Because it's so disconnected, that's one of the biggest issues in my opinion, industry-wide, is these silos of money that don't communicate.
It's always the accountant's fault.
Or the controls guy.
I was like, I didn't say engineer.
So let me ask the panel, so there are two vacuums here. One, a vacuum of communication, not communicated enough, and there's one of training. So is there a process that we could instill? Do you see a process that would improve that communication? And then what is the likely process for better training? And who does that? Is it the control manufacturer? Is it the service company that's taking care of it? Where's that from?
Or is there a third vacuum? Is there something else that we're missing?
There's definitely a third vacuum. I mean, the biggest vacuum, in my opinion, is just general education in the United States. That's a whole different can of worms. The people coming out of school, the biggest issue, David, is being curious. Right? I would rather have
Say that again, being curious.
I would rather have somebody who's curious, right? And that wants to try to understand than somebody that is just programmed to like do tasks, right? Decisions. If somebody's curious, then I can work with them and they want to understand and I can help grow them, right? And help grow them into being able to make better decisions and understand how. So the curiosity piece for hiring employees and having people work on this stuff is huge in my opinion.
With less people coming in the industry, more buildings being built, very much more complex buildings being built, AI is inevitable. How do we as an industry embrace that more than just saying we don't want it? It's gonna interrupt our business, and it is. How do we embrace it and make our businesses better by using AI?
I think some of that was what you were talking about earlier, is using AI as like a predictive or a troubleshooting metric, looking at the data, trend data, operational data, and then spitting out, these are your most likely causes for this condition. Your maintenance guy, go check X, Y, and Z. You know, so you take the thinking portion, troubleshooting portion, which I feel like is one of the biggest gaps. If you don't have an understanding, then you can't troubleshoot the system, okay? Then let AI troubleshoot it for you, you just go put the belt on, it's off. That's why my fire camps high.
And I think it goes back to kind of our earlier conversation about pneumatics to PPC, right? We're very much risk averse, the entire group is, right? So we're not gonna do it till you show me that it works. And we need the manufacturers to show us that it works. I'm not gonna suggest it to a client until I feel confident that it works, right? Because it's all of our reputations when we do a project for a client. And if it doesn't work, then it's on all of us, right? So it's very much show me that it works and then I can embrace it.
The reality is
There'll be
that labor
small adoptions into the industry.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
And it's kind of like Brown's
It'll be
theorem. We're
bite
gonna
sizes.
get technology building in, and then all of a sudden it's gonna get to a point like cell phone, where now you have a supercomputer in your pocket.
Mhm.
I mean, it's kind of how all this stuff works.
I want to remind everybody that twisted pair works. You know,
That's right.
You know, I walked around with a little wire in my pocket for a long time, and everywhere I went, eventually, it became solution.
So if you just look at human nature, right? You look at self-driving vehicles, let's say, just to forget about the building, let's go self-driving, right? It's a thing where it's a human interaction, like, do we want a computer to start driving our car for us? There's this barrier, there's gonna be this natural resistance to say no. And so, but what happens is, do we want the computer to be able to pick the best route for us so we can get from point A to point B? Yeah, absolutely, right? And so what's gonna happen is you'll have vehicles that can be self-driving, then you'll have self-driving only routes that will become the faster route, which inevitably is like, yes, I'll take a chance on going this route, taking my hands off the wheel for this short duration of my trip, right? And then that's how, and so same thing for what we're talking about. It'll be, do you want this AI feature? And they probably won't even call it AI, right? That, in our industry, it's probably, we won't call it, it'll be AI, we'll call it something else. Smart. Do you want this feature of the building to be able to do this for you and tell you to go change the belt? Whatever. Artificial intelligence is never going to be able to change a belt on a aerial, right? And so it's not going to take over. It's only going to do the jobs that nobody else wants to do right now anyway, or nobody can, right? That's my take.
Good, you have anything else? Good. All right.
And to your point, and the title of this thing, yeah, it's a revolution when you look at it holistically, but it's actually an evolution.
Yeah.
Because we can't tolerate or stomach a revolution.
Unless the pain just gets too unbearable.
I like it. I like evolution.
Yeah, let's change our slide.
Change.
We're now our marketing director.
The revolution's worth discussing, the evolution is what's gonna happen.
Right.
Yeah, that's right.
I got a real quick question. Besides the HR person on the panel, who's not an architect on school, but capable planners. Are they on board with helping lead that conversation? The OEC team is all, led by that. As a contractor, you get to drive some of that, as an engineer, you get to drive some of that, but is their industry reaching, crossing arms with our industry to help bring this to fruition? When I say that, I'm talking about networks and operability, the whole, everything you discussed relies on another person that's not right, unless you do design build all the time, and we all know that's not all the time.
Right.
Yes.
Yes.
From an industry to industry standpoint.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, the architects that I work with is both, if I don't ask the question first, they'll be like, hey, when are we gonna ask,
Help lead the witness.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, architects are fully, yeah, absolutely. And AI, and that's not just the architect, their industry as a whole.
They may be even more so than anybody else.
Yes.
Well, they're thinking
Through
about
the
it.
AI.
Are they integrated? That's the question.
Yeah, they're helping to have, I would call it, creating safe space for the discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you want to be an architect for a minute?
Yeah.
They're creating safe spaces, but it's not their decision.
No.
Exactly, right, but it's their job to create safe space and have the discussion be had so that the proper answer with all stakeholders involved can come out of that, right?
Sure. Yeah. It's just
That's happening. As far as
part of the integrated conversation at the threat level, just their own expectations.
Yes. And pushing for charrettes. I mean, that's something architects love, these charrettes, and the rest of us are. But no, if the architects that do the charrettes to get answers, right? And go through the idea of the process, which is owner's project requirements and basis of design.
Right.
Okay. If they do the charrette properly to get these questions answered, to hone these things in, then they give that to us. That's easy. That we've got the roadmap.
Yeah.
To take the building from this idea, concept, the rest of the way through. That's our now.
Well, the current stage is code minimum, high-performance building, then you start talking about AI, whatever you want to call it, right? I mean, you get into the more progressive or ethereal stuff that isn't just defined in the industry, so it's imperative to get it in that OPR.
Yeah, too often it goes, right, the client solicits, they have a project, they let's listen for an architect, right? The architect then goes to.
Right.
Yeah, you know, and it's, we're gonna procure it this way every time, right? And to maybe kind of change that dynamic a little bit, I think would be helpful to have, and like you said, like the design build avenue. I like that approach because then all the stakeholders are at the table and can provide input and direction and guidance. That is by far my preferred choice, as opposed to kind of, this is how we've always done it, and then we're gonna keep doing it this way, and we're gonna keep getting the same results every time we come out the other end, right? So I like the fact that if we can have those conversations and maybe build the team more in like an IPD type of environment, it makes it so that we're all in the process together and can deliver that project together. So I don't know if that answers your question.
That's good. All right, we're out of time for this.
One more.
Good. Do it.
I was just gonna say, I hate the word charrette. If I never hear it again, I'll be okay. But I would like to know how many of you wind up participating in like an OPR or a project requirements meeting up front, which strikes me as your opportunity to get some communication in the beginning with the customer. To me, that's your opportunity to get, the customer's a hybrid. Customer has multiple heads. There's never one customer that can answer all your questions. Do you have that opportunity to meet with all those customer representatives, can answer all those questions? Give you the opportunity to say, have you thought about this? Do you have energy goals? You know, am I gonna be able to build the building you need to meet all your needs?
Yes. The double-edged sword with that is the more questions I ask, the more it becomes on me to even educate as I go. So that, okay, so the more questions I ask and go down this path, if I'm the tip of the spear and leading that discussion, then a lot of the conversations end up being, okay, I need to pull back, create a fundamental education of what we're talking about with the stakeholders, right? So it's kind of like, it becomes extremely refreshing when I ask questions that people, the stakeholders are very familiar, know what they want, and then we go through, and then that's when it's like, okay, wow, we could really do something new and different and cool, right? Because I don't have to educate a lot of, you know, what's happening with the industry, this and that, why is open protocol important, why integrating multiple systems across, right? Not just lighting and HPC, but maybe security and all this kind of things together. So yes, it's just a matter of, depending on the project, how far can we go before it's like, not, we just need to pull back and get back with more status quo of what needs to happen on this project. Does that make sense?
I would say the best projects I've ever been involved in. So you got somebody who's making the decisions for the client, right? They're the last decision, right? They're the ones that, if you ask a question and they go, this is absolutely how it's gonna be, period. Okay, which is great. I do like it when they do consult their internal clients and ask the questions to validate their goal. And then we all are communicated with that information. The very best projects I've been involved in have been very much owner collaborative and allow us to work together as a team, as opposed to, I'll design it, you'll price it, you bid it, and we never have that conversation, right? And the stakeholders who are gonna operate, own, manage, don't ever have input. It's just that one person that's just making all the decisions. And so it makes it very hard when they don't consult their internal clients to know that what you're gonna present to them at the end is only that person's vision, but not the vision of everybody who's gonna be managing the building or operating or occupying the building. So it's always good. The very best projects I've worked on have been all collaborative.
Sounds great. All right, you guys are great. David Organ,